May 8, 1945. Lechfeld Air Base, Bavaria. The air still smells of oil, burnt fuel, and defeat. Hauptmann Erich Fischer stands on the damp tarmac, his flying jacket zipped against a chill that has nothing to do with the morning mist. In front of him, in ragged, silent rows, are the vultures that could not fly home. Ma-262 Schwalbus, the world's first operational jet fighters, sit on their tricycle landing gear, their sleek, shark-like lines a stark contrast to the cratered runway and the slumped shoulders of the ground crew. Their Jumo 004 engines are cold. Some have their access panels hanging open, cannibalized for parts that no longer exist. A mechanic slowly, methodically smashes the glass of a gyro gun sight with a hammer. The tink, tink, tink is the only sound. Fischer's orders, passed down from a chain of command that has dissolved into thin air, were clear yet absurd. Render the aircraft unfliegbar, unflyable. But as he watches the mechanic, the futility of it washes over him. They are destroying secrets that the entire world now knows exist. Just beyond the perimeter fence, in the dense pine forest, he knows there are more. Aircraft tucked into makeshift revetments, covered with branches, hidden from the relentless fighter sweeps, a ghost fleet. His reverie is shattered by a new sound, not the banshee wail of a Jumo turbine, but the deep, throaty rumble of American diesel engines. A jeep, followed by a truck of grim-faced GIs, barrels through the main gate, which hangs from a single hinge. A young American lieutenant in a pristine tanker jacket jumps out, his .45 holster unsnapped. His eyes widen as they sweep the line of jets. He doesn't look at Fischer, he looks past him, at the technology. This isn't a surrender, it's a transfer of ownership. "Which one of these birds still has engines?" the lieutenant asks in passable German, his voice cutting through the quiet. The mechanic stops his destruction, the hammer poised in midair. The race for the ruins of the Luftwaffe isn't a future event. It begins here, in this moment, on this broken tarmac. The war is over. The treasure hunt has begun. Across the crumpled Reich, the scene is repeated with different actors. At Bad Zwischenahn, a British Royal Air Force officer steps over the skeleton of an HE-162 Volksjäger, the salamander fighter made of wood and desperation. In a vast underground factory at Kala, American infantry from the 3rd Armored Division shine their flashlights on the incomplete, bat-like forms of Horten HO-229 jet flying wings, covered in a fine white dust from the gypsum mine. In a forest outside Prague, a Czech resistance fighter touches the cold metal of an Me-163 Comet, a rocket-powered interceptor that climbed to altitude in minutes, its volatile fuel now drained. Thousands of machines, from the obsolete to the unimaginably advanced, now sit in a state of suspended animation. Their pilots and creators are prisoners, deserters, or dead. Their new masters have just arrived, and they speak English, Russian, and French. They have lists, and they are in a hurry. May 12, 1945. Melun-Villaroche Airfield, occupied France. The air here smells different, a French countryside, new canvas, and relentless purpose. A C-47 transport plane disgorges a very different kind of American officer. Colonel Harold E. Watson of the U.S. Army Air Force's Technical Intelligence steps onto the grass, a leather-bound notebook already in his hand. He is not here to fight. He is here to shop. His mission, dubbed Operation Lusty, has one objective: find, evaluate, and ship the most valuable German aircraft back to the United States. He is a curator for a museum of the future. Around him, the airfield is transforming into a bizarre gallery of enemy air power. A captured Me-262, its engine cowlings removed, is surrounded by a hive of engineers scribbling notes. A team is carefully crating a dismantled Focke-Wulf Ta-152, the ultra-high-altitude interceptor that could outfly anything the Allies had. Watson walks past them, his eyes scanning the growing collection. He stops at a bulbous, twin-boomed aircraft that looks like it was drawn by a mad scientist. It's a Messerschmitt Me-163 Comet, the rocket plane. "Is the fuel residue neutralized?" he asks a corporal, who nods vigorously. One wrong move with the leftover T-Stoff and C-Stoff, and this whole area would vanish in a chemical fireball. Watson's lists are exhaustive, born from years of grainy reconnaissance photos and alarmed pilot reports. He needs a jet-powered strategic bomber, the Arado 234 Blitz. He needs a four-engine jet, the Junkers Ju-287 prototype with its forward-swept wings. He needs the mind behind it all. His teams aren't just securing airframes, they are combing villages and prisoner-of-war cages for specific engineers, men like Kurt Tonk of Focke-Wulf and Alexander Lippisch, the father of the tailless and delta-wing designs. The intellectual loot is as critical as the metal. But this is not a one-sided race. 600 miles to the east, a parallel and far more brutal scavenger hunt is underway. Major Vasily Kuznetsov of the NKVD Technical Commission does not have lists, he has quotas. His teams, often trailing behind the combat troops of Marshal Konev's fronts, descend upon the shattered aircraft factories of Saxony and Thuringia. At the vast, empty complex of Junkers in Dessau, they don't bother with individual planes. They sketch diagrams of entire assembly lines, label every machine tool, and begin the systematic dismantling of buildings themselves. Crates marked with Cyrillic script are filled not with finished jets, but with lathes, hydraulic presses, and wind tunnel components. Whole design bureaus, their staffs invited at gunpoint, are loaded onto trains heading east. The Soviet philosophy is wholesale. If you cannot understand the technology, take the factory that built it and the men who conceived it. Their prize isn't just a trophy, it's an entire industrial generation to be replanted in Soviet soil. Back at Melun, Watson watches as a restored Me-262 is carefully fueled for a test flight by a captured Luftwaffe pilot under guard. The engine whine builds to a piercing shriek, a sound of a future that arrived too late for the Reich. As it rolls down the runway, Watson makes a note. He knows the Russians are doing the same, somewhere in the rubble of Berlin or Vienna. The war is 5 days over. The next war, the cold, silent one of technological supremacy, has its first prototypes. June 15, 1945. The port of Cherbourg, France. The salty Channel wind does little to cut the smell of fresh pine lumber and engine grease. Here, on the battered docks, the fruits of Operation Lusty are being prepared for their transatlantic voyage. The scene is one of organized chaos. Craters from the 1944 bombings pockmark the area, but now the cranes are swinging not with munitions, but with wooden crates of unimaginable size. Inside one, suspended in a custom cradle, lies the disassembled fuselage of an Arado AR-234 Blitz, the world's first jet-powered bomber. Its wings are in another crate. Its Jumo engines are packed separately in oil-soaked rags. To a stevedore, it's just another piece of awkward cargo. To the Army Air Force's technician supervising, it's 1,000 research papers given physical form. Nearby, a young engineer, Lieutenant Robert Bob Stanford, uses a 2-inch paintbrush to carefully apply a fresh coat of U.S. insignia, a white star in a blue circle, over the faded German cross on the vertical stabilizer of a Focke-Wulf FW-190D. This long-nosed Dora is not going in a crate. It's being rolled up a steep gangway onto the escort aircraft carrier USS Reaper. The ship's deck is a forest of tied-down German aircraft, a crow's nest of alien technology. An Me-163 Comet is lashed down near the island's superstructure, its rocket nozzle pointed ominously at the bridge. The ship's crew gives it a wide berth. Rumors about its explosive temperament have spread. Stanford steps back, admiring his work. The captured fighter now wears the markings of its victors, a symbol of the total reversal of fortune. The Reaper is not heading into battle. It is heading home with the spoils of a war already won. The journey east for the Soviet prizes is less nautical, but less monumental. On the congested Reichsautobahnen, convoys of flatbed trucks guarded by Red Army soldiers with PPSH-41 submachine guns groan under the weight of massive, tarpaulin-covered shapes. They carry not whole aircraft, but entire machine shops, furnace units, and half-assembled jet engines from the Junkers and BMW factories. Traveling with them, in separate, more comfortable cars, under a different kind of guard, are the human components, stressed, silent German engineers and their families. For men like Dr. Brunolf Bad, a Junkers designer, the choice was bleak: cooperate for the Soviets in the East or try their luck with the Americans in the West. His expertise on swept-wing design is now a state commodity of the USSR. Meanwhile, in the American zone, the gathering point is Freeman Field, Indiana. By late summer, its hangars and aprons will look more like Lechfeld than an American base. Row upon row of captured aircraft, over 160 individual machines, will sit under the Midwestern sun, a haunted fleet. But the most valuable cargo arrives with less fanfare at Wright Field, Ohio. In a secure office, Professor Alexander Lippisch, the Delta Wing pioneer who designed the Me-163, sips coffee with his American counterparts. He is not a prisoner, not quite a guest. He is a resource. He spreads blueprints on a table, pointing to the graceful sweep of his unbuilt P-13A, a supersonic ramjet concept. The men listening are from Bell Aircraft and the newly forming National Advisory Committee to Aeronautics. The transfer of knowledge is direct, unimpeded by translation or espionage. The plane is gone. The mind that conceived it is here, working. The ultimate prize was never the machine itself, but the thought process that created it. October 10, 1945, Muroc Army Airfield, California. The dry, cracked lakebed of the high desert shimmers with afternoon heat. Here, far from the ruined forests of Germany, the future is being unpacked. Captain Frederick "Fred" Borsodi stands on the blistering tarmac, a parachute harness chafing his shoulders, staring at the machine he is about to fly. It is Me-262, Werknummer 111711, now repainted in gleaming overall silver, with FE-111 stenciled in black on its nose. It's no longer an enemy aircraft, it's a foreign evaluation asset. The ground crew, a mix of eager American GIs and a few sullen, cooperative German mechanics, give him a thumbs up. Borsodi straps in. The cockpit is cramped, the labels all in German, but he's memorized the translated checklists. He signals. A crewman connects an external starter cart. The whine builds, a high-pitched scream utterly alien to pilots used to the deep roar of piston engines. As he advances the throttles, the thrust pushes him back into the seat with a smooth, relentless force no P-51 Mustang could ever produce. The jet rolls forward, accelerating with a silent ferocity that feels unnatural. He's airborne in half the runway length. At 20,000 feet over the Mojave, Borsodi puts the Schwalbe through its paces. It's fast, terrifyingly fast, But he notes the sluggish throttle response, the vulnerability of the delicate UMO engines to sudden thrust changes. He's not just testing an aircraft, he's auditing a doctrine. He lands, his mind racing with tactical implications. A squadron of these in 1943 would have changed everything. In 1945, it's a data point for the next American jet. Meanwhile, at RAF Farnborough in England, a similar ballet of evaluation is underway, with a British accent. Test pilots like Captain Eric Winkle Brown are conducting what they wryly call taxpayer-sponsored joyriding on a staggering variety of captured aircraft. Brown's logbook becomes a museum of the Luftwaffe. He flies the rocket-powered Comet, a hair-raising, fuel-limited dash into the stratosphere. He wrestles with the tricky, composite-built HE-162 Volksjäger. He evaluates the monstrous Blom & Voss BV-222 Viking flying boat. Each flight is a debrief, a dissection. British engineers, some of whom had their cities bombed by earlier variants of these planes, now coldly analyze their strengths and weaknesses. The information is immediate and practical. The swept-wing data from the ME-262 confirms theories their own aerodynamicists, like Barnes-Wallace, have been developing. The race is no longer to capture, but to comprehend and improve. Back in the States, the public gets its first staged glimpse. On a bright day at Wright Field, the trophy flight exhibition is staged for press and dignitaries. A captured ME-262 screams past the crowd, followed in a mock chase by the latest American propeller-driven fighter, a P-80 Shooting Star jet, and a propeller-driven P-51. The visual message is unmistakable. The German jet is fast, but the American jet is faster, and it's ours. The war-born technology is being seamlessly folded into a new narrative of national prowess. Yet in a guarded hangar away from the cameras, a team from Bell Aircraft is poring over diagrams from Professor Lippisch and from the crumpled remains of the Horten HO-229 flown in from Germany. The flying wings' radical low-drag shape and stealthy charcoal-infused wood glue coating are of intense classified interest. The immediate lessons are being applied to the next generation. The swept wings of the North American F-86 Sabre, now on the drawing board, owe a direct debt to the data mined from the ruins of the Reich. The physical trophies have been secured. The intellectual conquest is complete. Now the final question remains. What do the victors do with a haunted arsenal of the vanquished? April 23, 1946, Freeman Field, Indiana. A year ago, these machines were the cutting edge of a terrifying new age of warfare. Now they are corroding in the Midwestern elements. The trophy fleet at Freeman Field, once the subject of intense study, has become an administrative headache. Lieutenant Alan Hess walks down the neat rows, clipboard in hand, conducting a morbid inventory. The silver paint on the Me-262s is peeling under the Indiana sun. Birds have nested in the intakes of an Arado AR-234. The wooden wings of a Ta-154 mosquito fighter are warping from humidity. Hess's orders are clear. Evaluate for permanent retention. He stops at a particularly rare bird, a Dornier DO-335 File, the Arrow, a push-pull twin-engine heavy fighter with a top speed rivaling early jets. It's a marvel of engineering. He marks retain on his sheet. A few rows over, he looks at a standard Messerschmitt Bf-109G, a type the Americans had in the hundreds. He marks scrap. The logic is coldly pragmatic. You cannot keep everything. The secrets have been extracted, the reports written, the test flights completed. Now the physical relics must be disposed of. The most historically significant will be doled out to museums, like the Smithsonian. A select few will remain at Wright Field for ongoing research. The vast majority, however, are destined for the smelter. This scene of selective destruction is mirrored in Britain, but with a characteristic flair for spectacle. At RAF Bryce Norton and other sites, the RAF orchestrates grand bonfires. Piles of less significant German aircraft, U-88 bombers, HE-111s, dozens of Bf-109Gs are doused in petrol and set ablaze in pyres that light up the English sky. It's part practical disposal, part ritual exorcism. The threat that once darkened these skies is being literally consumed by flame. Yet, even as the flames crackle, a team at the Royal Aircraft Establishment is meticulously measuring the radar signature of a salvaged HOR 229 flying wing, its stealth characteristics noted for future, highly classified projects. The Soviet path diverges radically. There is no sentimental preservation, no public bonfires. At the newly established design bureaus near Moscow, the captured German technology is ruthlessly reverse-engineered and integrated. The Junkers Ju-287's forward-swept wing data feeds into Soviet bomber studies. The BMW 003 and UMO 004 jet engines are copied, improved, and become the foundation for the first generation of Soviet jet engines, the RD-10 and RD-20. The Messerschmitt Me-262 is not a trophy, it's a template. By 1946, the Yakolev YK-15 and MiG-9 are flying, their direct lineage to the Schwalbe visible in their straight wings and podded engines. The Soviets didn't just take the airplanes, they ingested the technology, accelerating their own jet program by a half-decade. Meanwhile, in other corners of Europe, the Luftwaffe's ghost finds a strange second life. The Czech aircraft industry, inheriting the intact Sudetenland factories, continues building the Messerschmitt Bf-109G, renaming it the Avia S-99. For a few years, the characteristic shriek of a Daimler-Benz engine over Prague is not a relic of occupation, but a product of it. The French, desperate to rebuild their air force, press captured Focke-Wulf FW-190s into service, using them as stopgap fighters and test beds, their swastikas overpainted with French rondels. By 1948, the Great Dispersal is complete. The silent race that began on the broken tarmacs of Bavaria has ended. The physical remnants of the Luftwaffe's technological surge have been scattered to the winds, a few in glass museums, many more melted into ingots, their alloys recycled for washing machines and cars. But their true legacy is not in the preserved relics. It soars in the swept wings of the American F-86 Sabre dueling over Korea. It thunders in the engines of the British de Havilland Comet, the world's first jet airliner. It forms the foundational DNA of the entire Soviet jet dynasty that would culminate in the MiG-15. The Luftwaffe's planes were defeated, captured, and destroyed, but their ideas, born in war, were captured, assimilated, and propelled the world irrevocably into the jet age.